Hi, folks. I'm Annette Pasternak, the Stop Skin Picking Coach, and I have with me today Dr. Charles Mansueto, who is the director of the Behavioral Therapy Center of Greater Washington and the author of this new book, Overcoming Body Focused Repetitive Behaviors. One of the authors, the lead author of this book. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
I love being here.
Would you like to just tell us about the book?
Well, the book is a sort of the latest chapter, you might say, or maybe it's a culmination of work that I've done with over the last almost over 20 years with BFRBs. Got into the field very early when it was still just barely a blip on the whole psychological scene. And along the way, Ruth Gollum, one of my colleagues, and Sherry, we all actually from the very beginning worked together in trying to figure out the puzzle of first understanding BFRBs and then trying to address them with a therapy that really did justice to what we were learning about the complexity and variation among the patterns that BFRBs can take, whether it's skin picking, hair pulling, or some related problem. It started in many ways the whole movement, the modern movement in understanding BFRBs. It goes back to 1990 when Sherry, Ruth, and I, and we're the three authors of the book, presented what turned out to be the first national symposium on, at that time, Trichotillomania solely. And we didn't know that, but it was at a major meeting in San Francisco. It turned out to be quite fortuitous because Christina, who had started, of course, you know Christina. Everybody knows Christina in this world of BFRBs. Christina, a wonderful person who was concurrently at that time beginning a grassroots movement, which has now become TLC. What's the rest of it now? It's a little new. It used to be TLC, the Trichotillomania Learning Center. Now it's TLC, the something.
TLC Foundation for BFRBs.
That's the word.
I could be wrong too.
Foundation for BFRBs. That's a name that's broadened since skin picking has been added. It wasn't until 2013 that skin picking was included as a psychological problem. It was mainly in the dermatological or the medical diagnostic categories. But in any case, Christina came to that meeting, as did many therapists who didn't know others were interested in trichotillomania. And in that room was really the first meeting of sufferers of BFRBs, doctors who were interested in it, and other therapists. And Christina pointed to all of us and said, I need you and you and you and you to join with me because we need science and medical and psychological researchers and to join with us in this effort. So out of that, a number of people in the room constituted the first scientific advisory board with TLC. So this is a long-winded, but it's a little convoluted. So over the years, we worked on the therapy. It's now called Combi therapy, comprehensive behavioral treatment for BFRBs. We've done a lot of training of therapists. We've trained over 1,000 through the Professional Training Institute of TLC. But what we hadn't, and done workshops for people all over the country, but never in one place had a resource for persons who do pull or pick their skin, pull hair or pick their skin. And that we knew we would get to someday. But here it is, decades later.
Wow.
But we got to it, and we've been working on it actually for over 5 years because we're fussy, and there was a lot to say, and we were working with a publisher who had their own ideas about best way to present this. I think it turned out a better product than we might have done on our own, and there it is. So now there is a book in the hands of people who don't have access to to a therapist or a coach and easily, or it hasn't worked for them. And here it is, a packaged program that we try to approximate how we would go through it if we had them in our therapy here at the clinic. Now, that was a lot of history, right? I'm sorry to go on so long, but a simple question, long answer.
Yeah. No, we're glad, took a while, but it's finally here. Both the explanation and the book.
I'll try to make the others shorter.
What's that?
I'll try to make the others shorter.
Oh, it's all right. So this book, by the way, we'll talk about it a little more, but this is available. You can use the link under the YouTube video to get this on Amazon. Yeah, I like the book a lot. So I've read through it. Yeah. This, it's got a lot of amazing things in it. Like you said, it's just someone can guide themselves through how you and the therapist in your center would guide them through, including, like, I love all the forms for people to fill out, and those are available, not just in the book, but you can download and print them out after you've bought the book. I think that's fantastic for people.
Well, we hope it works. That's what took us a lot of time we don't want too much, where sometimes people just like to read a book in bed and don't want to have pencils and be at their desk.
Yeah,
on the other hand, we know that engaging them early on was probably important to get an active approach, which is very important. We need that. We need the person to take the steps and not just think about them. There's also a lot of education. There's so much. We tried to provide so much depth about why we're asking each step to be achieved, and how our experience tells us that following this program in more, probably any program really, but following this is more likely to produce positive results if a person stays engaged and at each step. But in that little book, it's only that thick, but it has a wealth of information that many people probably hadn't either thought about, or if they thought about it, they haven't had answers to. So we hope that it provides those. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there in that little book. I really like the stories, and you see people going through the process with the examples, and you see what all their forms look like. And I think that's very helpful. And you certainly made it very apparent that this is not an easy thing to work through. Like, you have to do a lot of work. You can see that. Yeah. But you're also very encouraging. Like, you can do this. Like, there's no doubt about that. So
that's what we see in the real world, is that if anybody thinks it's easy, they're probably in for some disappointment. But if they think it as a very possible goal to achieve, then and are diligent enough, then likely progress will be made. So I appreciate your comments, by the way, because you know about these things so well, and you do these things well, and I. So it means something to me for you to say these things. And
I'll tell you more things I like about it, but I don't want to bore people with a lot of details right now. But can you tell us? Do you want to just give an intro into Combi and the different domains?
Yeah, sure. And Combi is another way that people read. The word is capital C-O-M and capital B, and it stands for Comprehensive Behavioral Treatment, just as an easy way to identify this particular approach. So the question about what essentially is it, right? I'm going to have to go back a step, back to that time in 1990 at that first conference. What precipitated that was I had been working with NIH on OCD projects, and they wondered if OCD, if Trichotillomania was a form of OCD. It still comes up as a question, right? I had felt that it wasn't, and now we have confirmed that it's sort of a cousin of OCD, but it's not not the same, and we have to treat it differently. Anyway, they tried a drug that had been shown to be useful for OCD on a subset of individuals with trichotillomania. And the results were clearly more disappointing than encouraging. It seemed to help some. It helped some for a while, and it just wasn't enough. And there were many disappointed subjects at NIMH because they thought they were coming to the citadel of knowledge and clinical expertise, and then to have not be improved or be improved only in a small way. Left them discouraged. So the NIMH understood. The reason I was there was because, as you know, and many people know, OCD is best treated by a combination of medication and learning-based treatment. We call it cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT. And so they wondered if CBT also might be used to address this problem, trichotillomania. And at the time, there was a treatment that had been in the literature since 1973. So this is 1990. It was kind of old already, but it was the one that seemed to have evidence for success in helping people with nervous habits. This trick was included into a big category called nervous habits. The technique was called habit reversal, and we tried it. And we were quite dissatisfied. Also, we had 40 or so persons to come here who were disappointed with the results there. So we had a wealth of potential to gather information. First, a lot of them had any of them who had treatment either had standard talk therapy, which to this day we don't think is very useful, but some had habit reversal, and they said, well, I had that. It's like white knuckling. You just, every time you have an urge, you just try not to do it. And the hope was that it would eventually, you wouldn't have to do it anymore. But when we talked to these persons who were in the studies, we found out that didn't satisfy if they didn't want the greasy ones, or the hairs, or they didn't like the gray ones, or they didn't like the thick ones, or the ones out of place, or the ones that weren't symmetrical. This stuff didn't go away by clutching your fists and bearing through it. So I gathered lots of information about why. Just simple question: why do you pull? Or another way to put it, what's a good pull for you? And boy, was I astounded, because nothing in the literature prepared me for hearing what you know, and many of your viewers know, that there are so many different reasons you hear. Sometimes it's about how it feels. For some, it feels so good. For others, it doesn't feel, it's painful, and they just do it in order to get the hair or the bulb of the hair, and they did things with the hair. And other ones, when they were nervous, it was a way of discharging some energy. But others, if they were bored, it gave them something to do with their hands and to focus on a task for a while. And on and on and on, I gathered this information, and I said, this has to get out there. And that's what prompted us to propose the symposium in the first place, right? And as part of that, now that I had all this information, I'm thinking, well, habit reversal is too simple a technique to address all the needs that these people seem to have in some way satisfied through the pulling of hair. Now, I know now we can say the same thing about the picking of their skin, but remember, back in those days, there was the disorder, the only one that was acknowledged was trichotillomania. Anyway, so that was the origins of COMB. Is there a way to gather all this information together and individualize it so that each person's unique needs and what satisfied them could be met in ways that didn't result in damage to their hair or skin? Skin later, hair then. And that became COMB, because I had to organize all the data I had, because it was just like too many facts. And I found out that 5 categories could capture many of the important variables that seem to constitute each person's own unique patterns. You know what they are now. We use the word scamp to help people remember what the categories are. One was sensory. Sensory had to do with the kind of things that attracted people to their hair or to their skin. Was it bumps or imperfections that were visual? Usually it was tactile or visual that prompted the behavior to begin. And as a consequence, what satisfied them sometimes was removal of something that they didn't want in their hair. Sometimes it was the feeling they got when they pulled. Sometimes it was the interesting structure that they had in the hair, the little root and all the rest. And so sensory seemed to be one category for many variables to ask people about. What is the kind of things that prompt you? Is it an itching? Is it a sensation in your eyebrows? Or is it a sight of a hair out of place? I won't go through all the details, but sensory was one important variable. A second one was cognitive, what they were thinking about it. I can't stand these crooked hairs. Unless I find a really good bulb, I won't be satisfied, or I'll have to keep digging forever unless I find a really fat one that I can do something with, pull it off or bite it or whatever. So there were ideas that seemed to support the patterns. So SC, that's the first two letters of Scamp. A was affect or feelings. What kind of feelings? Was it nervousness? Was it boredom? Was it either? Was it neither? Some people think of it as a nervous habit, but we were aware that just by treating anxiety and say biofeedback, that didn't stop it. Didn't stop a person who was concerned about symmetry of eyebrows or someone with a skin who can't stand scabs. They feel so rough and they look so unpleasant, and so it feels good to scratch them off, or in other ways it just gave them something to do, to search for bumps and so forth. So I'm going to try to tie it a little, even though that wasn't back in 1990. Later on we've tied it in with with skin picking as well, right? And so the affect, how do you feel after picking or pulling? The initial feeling often was one of satisfaction. I popped that pimple. I got something out. And that would be a feeling of satisfaction and an accomplishment that supported it. So SCA, affect, feelings. M is the pure habits. Often hands seem to have a life of their own. So somebody could be at their computer or reading or something, and without realizing it, they're looking for a feeling for something to pull a pick at. And once you start, all of us as human beings know that once you start something, it's harder to stop it than if you didn't start it at all, like trying to eat just one potato chip or one piece of candy. It's harder to stop. So we realized that. So motor habits meant that there was unawareness of even some of the patterns of picking and pulling. And so we had to bring that more to awareness. But it varied from one person to another. Some were very aware. They'd go to the mirror, they'd get their pins and they'd get their tweezers, and other ones, most of the time they wouldn't even know they picked at their skin until they saw blood forming on their clothes or under their fingernails, or hair pullers would see piles of hair next to them. And how did that get there? Well, it was unconscious. So SCAM, and then the P is the place, because most people don't pick or pull everywhere. They have certain places where it's more likely than other, and times of the day. So it isn't just place, it's environmental variables. When they're alone, when they're tired at night, when they're putting their makeup on or taking it off, when they're in the bathroom, sitting on the john or getting ready for a shower. So the place became important. Now we had a scheme for taking each individual and not treating them as skin pickers or hair pullers. It was a person who had a unique pattern that we could learn about and ask about. And once we knew what the pattern was, then we had a potential for fitting a therapy in that addressed the important variables for that individual person. So the therapy could look quite different from one to another. And it was a collaborative effort. People not only told us, but they became students of their own patterns and then studied it well. And when you know something well, you're in a much better position to address it effectively. So it was much more complex, much more individualized, these patterns, BFRBs, and COMB is an effort to recognize that and appreciate that and be respectful of that. So we could then provide people with tools that were individually geared for their uniqueness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. It's really smart. And in the book, it's like you go step by step, taking first the sensory, and the person, thinks, okay, what are the sensory things that contribute? And then you have a whole list of interventions, and they can tailor it to like their specific thing. And then you go on to cognitive. So it's really nice, like, at least you're not overwhelming people with everything at once, and
that's what we hope. That's what we hope, and tried very hard to accomplish. That's why it took so long. If a person picks up a self-help book and they get to the end and it didn't help them, that's not only neutral. That could be another kind of blow, and yet it everyone, we understand, wouldn't be able to necessarily accomplish everything, every goal so smoothly. So that's where it goes in, where the educational part comes in, and to help people who might not be achieving the perfect success at every level to stick with it, because we've learned in therapy that sticking with it and not being discouraged, not having setbacks of any sort, teaches somebody something. What was it that made me vulnerable in that situation where I worked so hard to get my eyebrows back, or to get my skin so I could go out without lots of makeup to try and cover it? What was it that happened? What was my mood like? What was what my fingers doing? Or where was I? Was I looked too long in the mirror? Was I so each time that we prepare people for understanding that inevitably, as human beings in a complex journey like that, there are going to be setbacks, but that cannot be a sign of failure unless the person deems it that. It can be instead an opportunity to learn more about how to better prepare for the next situation like that. So they get stronger and stronger by understanding, becoming a student of their own behavior, and then their own therapist. Because even in therapy here, where we have a therapist one-to-one with the person, it's still a collaborative effort. They have to instruct us, or we're helpless. We don't know what's up. And then they have to tell us if something that a technique we recommended or mentioned worked for them, and how well, or they don't like it. I don't like that. One time it looked like koosh ball therapy all over the country. Everybody thought, grab a koosh ball. Well, some people told us that drives me crazy. It makes me want to pull out every hair in my body every time I So there, again, the uniqueness of each individual, and that's why it's such a collaborative effort. And I hope in the book it allows each person to realize there's a wide range of possibilities. But theirs are rather narrow. They can learn about among the wide range, which are most applicable, and address them in a very personalized way. Mm-hmm. You can tell I believe in this stuff, right?
Of course.
I've been living it for a long time.
Yeah, it's not belief. It's, you have clinical experience for decades. I'm curious of the, thinking back of the patients you've worked with, maybe thinking about which of those you feel would have been able to do the book, do this program from the book, which, really needed whether it was weekly, and what was the difference in the person, and what was the difference in what they needed from you? Am I getting this clear?
No, I love the question. Okay. It's a great question, and it's and I could start almost like I'm dressed for the gym, because that's where I'm going after we do this, right? I don't like exercise for exercise's sake. Some people love it, right? And so I have to. I play racquetball, and my wife this morning went off to yoga, and she said, "You're going to join me this next phase, because you have to sign up." I said, I really don't like yoga. I mean, I know it's good for me and it's good for balance, and but I just don't. So, well, I need something. I need to know myself and know that I'm going to drop out of things that aren't enjoyable for some other reason besides just getting exercise. Some people, but I can do that without having a trainer, for example. But some people realize that a trainer will take them to another level. So it's about levels of care. Levels of need, you might say. We have to, when we know ourselves, we try to set it up so that our goals, we can achieve them, but often we're unrealistic, like New Year's resolutions. How many people really, meet their New Year's resolution? So to appreciate the complexity and difficulty in being human and being flawed and having trouble breaking habits, then that there are great differences one to another. Now you've asked me, what are those differences, though? And I don't know. It's one thing we have to scientifically study better. In other words, what are the difference between individuals who seem with any given level of care, any given therapy, to achieve their goals successfully, wildly successful, versus those who get some improvement, versus those who get virtually no improvement, and maybe some who get worse. So we don't know that exactly, but I'll speculate. In the book, and that reflects thinking, is that if a person is willing to first look at where their life is, if they're in the middle of turmoil, if they've got too much on their plate, it may not be the time to tackle something seriously that's going to take some focus. So we go through that. How do you determine if this is the right time, and how do you make adjustments in your life for an effort that is so important to so many people? So one is to be realistic about if this is timing, right? A second is the approach. If a person, again, thinks it's going to be too easy, or thinks this is just another waste of time, but I'll go through it just so I can say I tried everything, So we're trying to adjust that. And parts of the chapters there are to learn about our own thinking and values, and so there's chapters on just preparing for the effort. Then we encourage people to be curious, like a reporter or a scientist. Like, wow, kangaroos! I wonder how they eat. I wonder where they sleep. I wonder if they play. I wonder if and just to turn it on themselves and be a student of themselves, because there's so much to learn. In habits, they just what are your feet doing when you're going down the steps? You don't know exactly what they're doing. They know what they're doing. But if you studied it, and then you'd learn more about the pattern of, so on and so forth. So anything that you know more about, you're gaining power over the potential to change it, right? And so that's what the other part is, to be a student of your own behavior. And finally, it's to understand that as human beings, our trajectory for success is never a perfectly straight line, moving upward every day. That especially in breaking habits that have been had a history to them and meet so many human needs, that prepare yourself well for the disappointments, for the days that are worse than the day before, for how hard you worked, and then realize that in a short time you've done so much damage. That those are not signs of failure, and we hope they don't lead to despair. They lead to a recommitment to understand that better, to move on. So we're trying to encourage a certain orientation toward it that we work with it individually in therapy, and you as a coach work with. It's a human endeavor, and it's just another thing that's hard to do, that's going to take a lot of commitment, that has a history with failures that make people discouraged at times, wonder if there is any chance for success. But human beings are pretty amazing and can do wonderful things when the variables are in the right direction, and we're hoping people get those variables all pointing in the direction of success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the biggest differences is being encouraged versus discouraged. And one of the things that, it might be easier to get from a human.
Yeah, it is.
But
It's that's why coaches and teachers, professors, uh, guides. I mean, we there's nothing embarrassing
mhm,
about needing another level of help.
right,
It's smart. It's not a sign of weakness to say, "Hey, I don't know how to fix my pipes. I'm going to call a plumber."
right,
So in this case, I don't know how to fix my skin picking and hair pulling, so
yeah,
I'm going to get some help with this.
yeah,
And if you can have access to proper help, and that requires money and luck, because geographically there aren't that many people who really understand this well enough to be good guides
right.
or to be good coaches or to be good therapists. So what about them? And that's where a book.
Well,
This isn't War and Peace. I don't
right,
expect
no,
to change the world, but I do hope that it will provide that level of assistance
I'm
for
sure.
those who can't get the ultimate kind of care, the
Yeah.
personalized therapy.
Yeah, and I'm sure, yeah, both of our books I think are very encouraging. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who do, read books do get that encouragement from it. It's the ongoing, it's like people, tend to think they read a book once and that's it. But I think to get remotivated, yeah, people may want to be reminded that like there's no problem with like reading certain passages again and again in
Uh-huh.
your
We're
books
going back
because
to it, right? Because how many, no matter what we've learned in school, we forgot some of it, or we disregarded it in the
yeah,
first place, never really learned it. And so sometimes it's better to go back and get refreshed about what's useful.
yeah,
And that's where these things can come in. Yes, it's not the highest level of care, but it's another level of care that's better than just trying to improvise when, like me, trying to rewire my computer. I can't do it and forget it. So I do need help, and if I can get somebody to do it for me or to show me how to do it, that'd be great. But if not, if I can go online and get some instructions step by step that will help me achieve that goal, great.
so thank you for being on today and sharing about this book with my viewers and thank you for writing the book. And I know it was like, you all are full-time therapists, so I know it went slow, but I'm really glad it's finally here. So yeah,
And thank you. I always like spending time with you. You're
aw,
fun and
likewise.
smart and good, and I love that you asked me to come on, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to the next time we collaborate.